I was in my last area, and I was training the sister named Hermana Novoa. Hermana means sister. So I was training Hermana Novoa, and we're walking in the street, and again, this is the thing that I learned, talk to everyone. I'm going to have to start that over because I thought of something else. But, so when I was in my last area, Oceania, I was training this sister named Hermana Novoa, and we were walking through the streets, and we saw someone, and what we've been taught as missionaries is to talk to everyone. And if they reject you, you ask if they know anyone else that would want to listen to the message. And so we're walking along, we see these two people, we go and talk to them, and they say, oh, we've already heard your message before, we are not really interested. And so we said, well, do you know anyone else that would be interested in listening to us? And they said, oh, you can go talk to our neighbor. His name is Jesus Manuel. I think he's listened to the missionaries before. And so we went and we knocked on his gate. And we knocked on his gate and said, Buenas tardes. And he came out. He was this 80-year-old man. His like white hair, mustache, and he let us in. Long story short, we ended up teaching him, and we were teaching him a couple lessons later, or a couple visits later, about the apostasy and the restoration. And me personally, I love teaching about the apostasy, which sounds kind of weird, but it's because you kind of piece everything together. You show how the church kind of fell apart and how the priesthood was lost, and then when you teach the restoration, you show how it all came back together. And so we're teaching Jesus Manuel, and he is just eating it up. And we teach about the apostasy, we teach about the restoration, and he is just so excited, and you could just tell that he understood, and he understood what we were saying, and he believed it. And we taught him about Joseph Smith, and he said, I need to go to your church. And we're like, oh, well, great. Of course you can come. I mean, we had invited him many times before, but he hadn't been able to go. But this time, he was ready. He was ready to go. And so we said, okay, well, come to the chapel. I think we met at, I don't remember what time we met at, but we told him what time to get there. And we said, do you want us to come pick you up? He said, no, I'm fine. I can drive there myself. He had this red Volkswagen Beetle. And so the Sunday came around, and we were with the bishop and his wife. They were helping us. They were just driving us around so that we could go pick up other investigators. Those investigators didn't end up coming, and my companion and I, we just had a feeling, let's go check and see if Jesus Manuel has left yet. And so we went to his house. His car wasn't there, so we thought, okay, he's left. He's at church. And so we get to the church, and he wasn't there. And so we were kind of confused, and we thought, okay. And his car wasn't in the parking lot. And so we go into church, we sit down, kind of waiting for the meeting to start. And we just thought, man, we just have to go look just one more time, see if he's there. And so we go out to the parking lot. We still don't see his car. We kind of wonder, where did he go? You know, his car wasn't at his house. Where did he go? So we go back in. The opening hymn is starting. And I just got so restless. And I was like, his car wasn't at his house. He has to be at the church somewhere. And so I grabbed my companion. We ran out. And we went outside of the parking lot and into the street. And we see his car parked on a corner over there. Now, just so to give you an idea, our church was on a very large block but it was kind of in back of everything. And there was another church on the block right next to our church, kind of in front of it, hiding our church from the main street. And so we see his car and we're like, oh, okay. And so we walk up to it thinking that he might be in there, but he wasn't in his car. And then we hear rock music. And we're going, And so we look over and we see the church, the other church. It was a Christian rock church. And we all of a sudden put two and two together and realized that he had not seen that our church was behind this church, this Christian rock church, and he had gone into that church. And we couldn't exactly just walk in there and get him out. And so we're trying to figure out what to do, and this person walks out, and we run up to them and we're like, hi, have you seen an older man in there with white hair, mustache? And they're like, oh, let's see. And you know, we're two sister missionaries. Our name tags are shining and bright in the sun, and we're very obviously not from this church. And we called the guy that we were talking to hermano, which is brother. And anyway, so he goes into the church, and eventually Jesus Manuel comes out just looking so confused. And he's like, I was just about to call you, but they don't allow phones in there. And I didn't see you anywhere, and they're playing this weird music, and they're doing weird things. And I just thought, this can't be the church that the sisters told me to go to. Anyway, so we led him back to our church just in time for the sacrament. And then when we separated to go to Relief Society and priesthood, he was in the priesthood class. We were in the same ward as our mission president. And so he gets into priesthood, and he introduces himself. We weren't there, obviously, but he told us about it later. He introduces himself, and he says, hi, I'm Jesus Manuel. I am investigating the church. But funny story, I went into the wrong church, and the sisters had to come get me out. That's not what we're supposed to do, and that's what we didn't do. But our mission president was in there, and he just thought it was so funny. But yeah, that's the story of how we almost lost an investigator to a Christian rock group. Another funny story. This kind of is a dumb. Okay, it's not a dumb story, but it's just an example of how the Lord listens to even the little prayers. Should I tell this? Yes, I will. So, something that missionaries did, we walked a lot, and it was kind of just a pastime, if there wasn't anyone in the streets, to look for coins. So you'd be walking along, and you'd find coins in the street, and you just pick them up and put them in your bag. And I was with a companion. We had been together for maybe 3 weeks, and she was so frustrated because she had yet to find a coin. She had been on her mission for probably about 8 months, and she had never been able to find a coin in the street. And I was finding coins left and right. Usually they're just like 50 cent, like 50 cent peso, or just like 1 peso or something like that. But she was getting really frustrated because I kept finding all these coins, and I would find them before her. And it was my goal in my mission to find a 10 peso coin. 10 peso coins are not usually found on the ground because they're very large and they're gold in color. I don't think they're actual gold, but they are gold in color, and you can buy a lot of snacks with them. And so no one's gonna just drop a 10 peso coin on the ground and forget about it. But it was my goal on my mission to find a 10 peso coin. And so I had yet to find one. And we're walking along, and she was just getting really frustrated. She hadn't found a coin yet. And I kept finding all these coins, and I thought it was just so funny. And we were walking to the member's house. We were going to eat lunch. And I remember just saying a little prayer in my head. I was probably starved for entertainment or something, but I said, Heavenly Father, just please help me to find a 10 peso coin. That would be so funny, because I have been finding coins all day, and if I could find a 10 peso coin, Hermana Mies would just be so mad, but it would be so great. Oh, this sounds like an awful story. But we go into the member's house. We eat lunch. We walk outside of the house. I took 2 steps, looked down, and there was a 10 peso coin. And I picked it up. I showed it to my companion, and she just exploded. She was like, "En serio, por qué?" And she, oh my gosh, it was so funny, but it just made my entire week. And I mean, I don't know if that was really the Lord answering my prayer, but I like to think it is, because that was probably the greatest moment of that day. I was about to say of my whole mission, but that was not the greatest moment of my whole mission. It was the greatest moment of that day. A really cool story. So I was transferred to my 3rd area called Sarco, and I was there for 6 months. And when I got to Sarco, my companion and her previous companion, they had contacted this really sweet lady named Alicia on the street. No, actually, one of the recent converts was friends with Alicia, and she brought them. Yeah, that's right. She brought them to Alicia's house. Anyway, long story short, they had taught the first lesson to Alicia, and I was there to help teach the rest. And Alicia was amazing. She accepted the gospel so quickly. She had really doctrinal questions that she had struggled with her whole life, and our message cleared them up for her, and she was just so accepting of the gospel. Alicia was in her 60s. She had led a really hard life. Her husband had left her about 10 years before. She has a 32-year-old daughter who has Down syndrome. And her son, Cesar, who is also in his 30s, maybe about 35 or 36, he is a very capable man. He's a baker, but he only has one functioning leg, so it's really hard for him to walk. But he is basically the breadwinner of the family. He supports Alicia and Letty, his sister. So as we were teaching Alicia, we also wanted to teach Cesar, but he worked the night shift at the bakery, and so he was always sleeping when we went to go teach Alicia. So we were always super sad that we didn't get to teach him, because Alicia was so accepting, and we thought maybe Cesar would be accepting as well. Alicia ended up getting baptized, and it was a beautiful, beautiful baptism. She looked like an angel. But right after she got baptized, we managed to start teaching Cesar. I don't really know how we managed that. I think we kind of worked up a deal with him where he said, after you baptize my mom, I'll listen to your lessons, or I'll listen to your message. Even though he worked the night shift, he was still up and ready to listen. When we had been teaching Alicia before, he had always just been in his room, asleep, wasn't there. But we started teaching him, and he was also very accepting as well. And what was really cool was that he said, we have had a lot of religious people come into our home. because my mom and I, we have had all these questions that we haven't been able to receive answers to. And he said, you don't know this, but when you're teaching my mom, I was in my room listening. He wasn't asleep like we had thought. He was listening to the message that we were teaching his mom. And he said, I have never heard so much truth spoken. He said, everything that you said rang true to me. And I believe it. And he said, one thing that really stuck out to me is that you don't tell us to believe, you invite us to believe. But also, as you're teaching, you say, I testify that this is true. And that just really impressed him. You don't really think about that when, for example, when you're bearing your testimony, you say, I testify that this is the true church. But you don't think about the impact that that has, that you really are testifying of the truth. And so as we taught him, he loved the gospel. He would do everything that we asked him to do. He was praying. He was receiving answers. And at one point during our lesson, we said, so how do you feel about this? And he said, hermanos, testifico que todo lo que ustedes han dicho es verdadero. He said, sisters, I testify that everything that you have said is true. He said, sé que esta es una iglesia verdadera. He said, I know that this is the true church. He struggled with feeling like he wasn't good enough to get baptized, when in reality we just saw a man who was doing his best, who was accepting the gospel and feeling the Spirit and feeling the atonement work in his life. And that just really caused me to reflect that when I'm getting down on myself, when I feel like I'm not good enough, or that I'm not doing enough, or when I feel like I'm just really struggling, I can think about Cesar, and I can think about how he was always saying, like, hermanas, I'm not clean enough. I still swear. You know, that was a big thing for him. He's like, I swear, and that, I'm gonna try to stop swearing. And we're like, hermano, I mean, yes, please stop swearing, but that doesn't mean you can't get baptized. And I just think about him, and I think we saw him for who he was as a child of God and someone who was really doing their best. He saw all of his imperfections, and we saw his potential. And so that made me realize that when I look at myself or look at others, that when I feel like I'm not doing my best, or when I feel like I'm not good enough, that God sees my potential, and that what I'm doing is seeing my imperfections, and that I should start to rethink the way that I am thinking. So that was a really cool experience, and they both started going to church. They have really strong testimonies, and I love them so much.